Hello and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Audrey Tang.
And I'm Judith Crozier.
This is the show where we have a discussion on all things mental health and well-being, but without your hot takes or quick fixes. We have up-to-the-minute expert information and tips and tools which you can use accessibly and practically to make things hopefully a little bit better. Yeah. Not perfect, but a little bit better. And talking of one of those tools, today's topic is AI. Yeah. We've talked about AI quite a lot on this show. But now we're going to look at it in terms of how are we going to use it effectively. So since we've talked about this before, I've changed my opinion on it, and I actually now do give AI tasks to do. But the tasks I give it to do are very much, I've written this response, it's a grant application response. How do I make it sound less obnoxious? How do I make it sound less angry? And it's still my content, but I just need it to not come out so raw.
Soften it a little
bit.
Yeah.
And then actually AI does quite a nice job of it.
Yes.
It says what I want to say without offending anyone.
Yeah.
So that's how I use it now. What about you?
I still try not to. I'm quite against it as a concept, which is ridiculous because it's everywhere and in the whole world, and you know, I can't deny that it's there, and it is. But I think I have used it a couple of times, I have to say, for advertising something on eBay. Yeah. It says, do you want to use our AI option? And I'm like, yes, I can't stand describing the item. So it's useful and it has its uses. Yeah. I was listening to the radio and an expert was talking about AI, and the presenter said, don't we need to reverse some of the things that it can do, so that all the dangerous things and all the potentially, destructive things it can do. He said it's too late. It's way too late.
It is
for that. So that's the side of it that neither of us like.
Yeah,
so,
there's a fear of that, and that's AI in itself as a machine that's very, very smart. And also the way some people are using it, which I know we're going to get into in today's conversation. We are welcoming back Nina Hobson, and she is from Barefoot Coaching, and she is going to be talking to us about how we can better incorporate these tools into our day-to-day lives. Let's meet her.
Hi Nina, it's so lovely to have you back with us.
Hi, thank you Judith, thank you Audrey, lovely to be here again.
Welcome
Thank you for having me.
We're talking about AI, and jumping straight into it then, do you think that it's inherently neutral, or do ethical problems mostly come from how humans design it and use it, or is there still an issue with how the data is used?
That's a big question, right? I think AI, no, it is not inherently neutral. I think the data that AI is built on is potentially biased. It's very much dependent on the quality of the data that we're using in AI sets, right? But I think it's also very nuanced to say AI is inherently bad. There's kind of often when AI is showing up or portrayed in the media, this kind of like Terminator style portrayal also isn't helpful. So I think there's nuance there. So I think it very much depends on the data. The design as well, I think, the way that AI works, a lot of AI, so generative AI, large language models, are built on probability, right? So not on fact, but very much on probability. So there's something there inherent about the way that AI is designed that we need to be very cautious about. But yes, as I say, it's very nuanced. I don't want to say an AI is inherently bad or inherently not neutral. We need to be careful. But it has great potential. So I think it's very nuanced. It really depends. It also depends how we use it, right? Both on an individual basis and on a societal scale as well. How we engage with AI is really critical, I think.
Yes.
So it's a really big question. So a very long answer. I think I could talk for an hour just on that.
True. But your last point kind of relates to my next question. So who is ultimately responsible when AI causes harm? Is it the developer, or is it the organisation using it, or the individual?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. I mean, are we talking from a legal perspective, or from an
good point.
ethical perspective? So, if we look legally, here I'm based in Spain, and the EU AI Act came into force. In the UK, we have a more, flexible, depending on the industry type system. So there, from a legal basis, it depends. It can be quite a grey area, but we're seeing increasing regulation come into force, which I think is great.
Yeah.
But I also think, just from an individual basis, it's not okay to say, well, I didn't know.
Yes.
We can't just throw it back to the designers. Yes, I think it can be really, really hard to understand AI. I've done a lot of, personal research into this. I'm really learning. It's a topic that I'm personally very, very passionate about. But it's really hard. It can be really hard for the end user to understand, and I think it's really important to engage, not to say, "Okay, I didn't know, I don't know," and to kind of hand back, but to really lean in and to engage and to keep learning and to be really clear about our own personal AI use as much as possible.
Yes, that's one of those really important things, because I wanted to get your thoughts on the accuracy, which is one thing of AI, because, as you say, it is biased, because it's only the information that is out there that it can process, and it depends on the question we've asked.
Yes.
If we've asked it a biased question, it's going to give us a biased answer.
Yeah.
Hallucinations, which is something that generally we know about, where AI can just make things up and make things sound like they're real, and you've generally got to check. Because once I asked it to just give me a list of all the studies in a particular area, and I had to check I didn't have to, I did check every single one of them. They were all genuine studies, but when you look at the abstract, it was kind of, that's not quite what you have told me it is.
Right, okay.
So you've always got to go back, and that was what I would do anyway.
Yes.
But then there's also an over-reliance on it too. So at the moment, I would find me the research in this area. AI gives me more than a Google search would, so I get more data, and therefore AI is, for me, a faster tool to use, but you still got to double check it. So what are your thoughts on accuracy, hallucinations, and how people become a bit over-reliant?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting there, you referring to the oversight. The human oversight is really important, but it has to be that quality, that expert human oversight.
Yeah.
So, you have a very solid background in psychology, so Audrey, so you can therefore look through and say, okay, that abstract, that's not what AI is telling me, and matching it up.
Yeah.
But somebody perhaps new might think, take it at its face value. It's just been in the press recently about, Google overviews, so AI overviews, and misconstruing, right? So, looking from a simple summary, it can be quite misleading, and you need to have that human oversight, but to really understand the outputs that it's giving us. So I think there's something about not just human oversight, but that quality of human oversight is really important. So understanding, what to ask as well. Thinking from a mental health perspective, using AI inherently for mental health support, I think is potentially very, very dangerous. Therapists, myself working as a coach, we can challenge. We can look at the nuance, and we can challenge, respectfully.
Yes.
Whereas AI, that sycophantic nature, offering what you want to hear. But somebody in a very vulnerable situation might not ask for that, or not ask for that. Nuance, that challenge, and respectful challenge. And I think that's an area where we just need to be so careful.
Yes, there's such a danger of just validation without any form of understanding. And we talk about this as humans, but if an AI is just allowing it to happen, then that is problematic. Then there's the flip side of it. Human skills are being lost because of an over-reliance on AI.
Yeah.
I understand if you're saying to AI, this is my information, could you shape it so it sounds like this, and there's a fine line there. But if you're just saying to AI, could you write this for me, write my essay for me, that's worse, surely. That we're getting into plagiarism, copying, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a question there about, are we using AI to enhance our learning or to replace our
Yes.
learning, right? You know, my kids, it's really interesting, just the next generation. I've got 3 children. And, you know, I saw my kid, you know, give me a mnemonic, give me, you know, a way to remember the rivers in Spain and the mountain ranges in Spain. And I think, oh, okay, that's great. You know, that's
Yeah.
supplementing. But using, you know, translate services, you know, to, you know, cheat on a test, less so. I'm not making any judgments there, but I think there's something about just being really clear about what are we using, you know, for, and what's the long-term benefit for ourselves.
That is a great place just to pause and reflect there, because I think you're absolutely right. And we are going to come back to Nina after a tip from one of our previous guest experts.
So I really like using AI and tech to support health. So here are a few things I'd like to recommend. So first of all, if you're looking at Google or AI tools like ChatGPT or Llama from the Meta platform, I would really encourage you to look at the settings, the privacy settings, because those platforms, they are vulnerable to being hacked, or people can find out your personal information if you are asking these platforms questions that include any personal references. So there are ways to add in security settings, but I would actually recommend using other platforms, including Perplexity. Perplexity is a platform that's got much stronger security measures. Your data isn't as vulnerable. They've got a different way of setting up their settings. So going into Perplexity as an AI platform to ask your questions is my recommendation. There are also 2 platforms that are based in Europe. One is from Proton, which is called Lumo. And because they're based in Europe, they comply with a European law, so there's a stronger privacy setting. And they're available both as a browser and an app. But there's also Green PT. So they are only browser-based, but they are very environmentally friendly, and they're also high on security. So I would recommend Green PT and Luma, which is the Proton one, as well as Perplexity, because they are, as far as security and personal privacy settings, they are sort of safer. Obviously, this is all very new world for all of us, but at least they seem to be thinking about these things, whereas ChatGPT and Llama are not so much. So check out those features for whatever tool you like to use. Then going into apps, I'm using Dalio. You can, and there will be presumably a link in the show notes to this platform. It's Slovakian. It's a small team. I love their ethos. Dalio also is highly customizable, both for the free version, but especially for the paid version, which I think is about £20 for the year. So it's reasonably affordable, I think, for most of us. And it's highly customizable. And this is where AI sort of combines with logging data points. So you list how you're doing in terms of moods and activities throughout the day, but also the AI features within that app show you trends. So it shows you, like, what are some of the activities that are doing on the days when your mood drops, or like tracking pain. This can see, oh, you were speaking to so and so, you were doing this when this spiked or this symptom went worse. So actually, because it's highly customizable to your own needs, you can actually make it almost like your health assistant. It's also, you can do backups from it if you pay for the paid version. So that's also about being able to track and own your data in case the platform goes down. Because, you know, if we give all our information into a platform and then they go bust and we haven't got a backup for ourselves, we've lost all that information. So I would say for any kind of tracker, habit tracker, health tracker, check some of those factors. The security features, the backup features or export features are really, and that it's customizable to you. So so I would really encourage you to do that. And then finally, I want to talk about wearable tech. So Visible is an app that a lot of people use that I support in the chronic fatigue, chronic pain community. You've got armband, or you've got something on your wrist, I think, as well. So they track lots of things that you can then look at and then steer your activity, steer your energy use, depending on what the wearable tech is giving you. There's also Aura, which I'm curious about. I haven't used it myself yet, but I'm looking at it and the reviews and some of the science behind it. It's basically a smart ring. There's a few of those around now, a smart ring. Some of them are not very reliable. They're not very consistent in the data tracking. And some of them don't seem to be that strong on the science beneath it. So as much as you're able to check some of that, and actually you can use platforms like Perplexity or Green PT to do some research about how reliable is this smart tag? What are the issues with this particular brand? So you're getting that kind of informed consumer choice. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope you can use some of these. I find technology is super helpful with the people I support, as well as my own practice. But it's that kind of using it in a smart way rather than just using it sort of because other people are using it or using it because that's what the tech offers. Make the tech work for you and bring in that curious, but also kind of critical, informed consumer choice to make the choices that you are making.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters, where we're having a discussion with Nina Hobson about the merits or otherwise of AI and the pitfalls, but also some positives as well. So thinking about some positive uses of AI, how can it be used to augment or assist or support human judgment and actions rather than merely replacing it?
I think, for me, in terms of efficiency, it can be incredible in terms of admin, speeding up tasks, and I'm using it more and more, I think, on a personal level as well too. And I've, worked with clients that have really benefited in terms of, feeling that level of procrastination. Okay, where do we even start? And AI really, really helping to get a grip, to get up to speed quickly. I also have family, working in detection and diagnosis of health issues like cancer, and I think the benefits are potentially it's out of this world. It's really really exciting stuff. So I certainly, I'm very, very excited about AI. I think it's very nuanced, the debate, and it can be easier just to put it in a AI good or AI bad.
Yeah.
Yes,
that
too easy,
fear, right?
Yeah.
And we have to look at it. AI is huge. It spans everything. From robotics to generative, agentic AI. So I think the debate we need to be really nuanced because it's really exciting as well.
Yeah, and the examples you gave of, they just open up the world, don't they, and make it a better place. So what ethical questions can arise when AI is used in creative work, so such as writing, art, teaching, or in therapy, and how can we best address those?
I think, in relation to art, I'm very aware that AI, if you like, is using the data that we already have, potentially mixing it together, mushing it together in, different ways, but is mimicking creativity. It's not creating anything new. So I wonder, I can't see a way in that AI is going to lead to this, paradigm shifts that we've, seen before in, art, culture, literature, because we're essentially working on databases that we already have.
Yes.
There's obviously the plagiarism concerns as well. I think it's very, very nuanced. I'm very worried as well about data breaches. I think we have to be concerned about privacy. I think it's also very telling that a lot of the key players in AI, very, very senior people recently, have left, walked out on the roles, people in safeguarding. So it's also very telling. But again, just thinking on a more personal level, there are so many tools to, help, with, art and create things and, to put, vision boards together using AI. And I thought, what? Actually, I want AI to do my washing up so I can go on
and be creative.
Art, right? There's something about the process, I'm not an artist, I'm certainly not, but I find, it can be very therapeutical. So I think we need to think about AI, how it can assist us and not replace the things that, give us joy and meaning and purpose and that feeling of, accomplishment and achievement. If we're not careful, I'm going to be, stuck doing the dishes and AI is doing all the fun arts.
It's true.
It should be the other way around, right?
Yes, that is so true. And Mike Cooley's book, Architect or Be, it covers that that point. It really addresses that point with computers. That computers were supposed to be there to take away all of the menial tasks, but it turns out that we ended up having to learn to program the computer, and we're still doing all the menial tasks, and the computer is doing these amazing calculations and creations. And yeah, I think AI is kind of a similar thing. Now let's relate this to, you've mentioned therapy, but also emotional support, decision-making, companionship. Those are other areas in which AI is being used. And you said something really important about simulating behaviors. And I really believe when it comes to AI, it is simulating niceness. You know, it's not, it can't be nice. It's a machine. So it's not even someone pretending to be nice. It's on a whole new surface level of it. So I guess, how do we set the boundaries around using AI and really understanding that it's not your friend?
It's a really good point.
You know?
I mean, I do wonder the extent to which that is, is possible. The inherent design of this, psychopathy and this, we're engaging, with these tools as a human. We know full well they're not. Reminded of, the ELIZA effect. So in the 1960s, an MIT professor created this, very simplistic, but really quite cool, very rule-based tool to feed back. If you like, following the work of Carl Rogers, so you typed in and it would summarize back this tool, summarize back, mirror back. And people started engaging with this very simplistic, tool from the 1960s, treating it as if it were human. And, this is often referred to this ELIZA effect in AI, and I found myself doing it and sort of kicking myself and reminding, hey, this is not a human here. And, I think there's one thing if I'm using AI to, help me sort out some breakout rooms, or, figure out, there's a lot of data here, look for patterns. At very low level of importance, and checking. But I wonder if people who are in more vulnerable situations turning to AI for emotional support and knowing, on a rational level, it's not a human. But when it is very, for vulnerable people in really challenging situations, it can be really, really complicated. And knowing, I know it's not a human, but I just want to feel. I just want that.
Which is heartbreaking.
That love. And it's not love, it's not empathy. It's just as you're saying, Audrey, it's mimicking that, right?
Yeah, mimicking is such a great word to describe it.
It's hard. Right? It's really hard.
So, sort of on the, I guess, the mimicking and also the fact that we know it's not real. It doesn't know it's not real. It's not a thing. But one thing I get drawn into, because we are effectively teaching AI, is I will say thank you to it.
Me too.
It's even Alexa.
Alexa.
I will say thank you because I don't want it to learn rudeness. And then when you put this into the human context, if on the one hand we're treating it as a machine, switch you off, switch you back on when I feel like it, I worry that is the behaviour that's carrying on into the human world.
Oh, yeah.
I can just switch you off, switch you back on again.
Yes.
I can ring you at 3 a.m. and I'll expect you to be there for me because my AI does. Those are real problems.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the ethical challenges begin. On the one hand, we don't want it to learn bad behaviours, so we need to treat it quite well. But on the other hand, it is there all the time. It is programmed to validate us and be sycophantic. How do we address that basic ethical challenge, actually, in our own thinking?
Yeah, I think there's something on a design level. There's that real tension between, technological advancement and commercial success and, ethical safeguarding. It's complicated on an individual basis. I think boundaries are really important, being really clear. What am I using this for? How long am I using this for? Being, really clear about our intent before we go in. And reflecting on our own use, being clear about, do I know about, where my data is going, how it is being used, especially if I am using other people's data. So, if you're working watching this and you're working in mental health, if you're a fellow coach, being really clear on our own ethical responsibilities and, leaning in. It's not okay to say, I don't know, but we really need to lean in, to learn, to keep on learning and to really engage. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, just to throw this on in the end, what projection do you see sort of in maybe, I have in here 5 to 10 years, I think I'm going to bring it back to even 2 to 3 years. What do you see might worry you or might actually be really wonderful? Because I think the medical advancements, all of those things, fabulous.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Incredible. The fact you can do surgery with a computer now, it's incredible. But obviously, the things to watch out for. So 2 to 3 years, what do we need to be aware of?
I was reflecting on this, and I think the truth is we just simply don't know. When a lot of the senior experts, a lot of the leaders within AI are walking out, that gives me cause for pause, for some concern there. But I do think, working in the field of, whether you're a psychologist, you're a coach, working within the sphere of, mental health, I think we are uniquely placed to help address this. Okay, what's going on? What are the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years going to look like? We truth is, I don't think we know, and these are very human challenges, and we need human solutions from that. And we are uniquely placed to help us get to grips with what these challenges and what these solutions look like. So, truth is, I don't think we know, and I'm learning, I'm engaging, and I think yes, I'm optimistic, and just keep on learning, keep on leaning in is what I'd say. But, truth is, I'm both excited and terrified in equal measure, and I think I'm taking a very cautiously optimistic approach a lot of the time.
That's a great way to say it, cautiously optimistic.
Yes.
We're keeping you, Nina, and we'll be back after a tip from one of our previous guest experts.
So I find that it's much more helpful and also more sort of pleasant for me as a human engaging with other humans to invite people to get curious rather than go, you got to look at this, you're looking at all wrong. So much rather go into, it's interesting to notice that when I have like a headache, it's not just, it could be because of a brain tumor, it could be because I'm thirsty, so anything in between.
Yeah.
How do you know the difference? How do you know if you're thirsty? Kind of inviting curiosity, I find is first of all more enjoyable, but also more successful because there's no shaming, there's no judging, there's no, pointing out, like there's a whole, like me, somebody just said, you don't really know much about your feelings. Because some doctor asked me to describe how I was feeling, like I was like in a lot of pain and whatever. And they were really struck by my limited vocabulary.
Yeah.
And when they was, you're clearly intelligent, you're clearly well educated, but you're not able to tell me really what's going on because I didn't have the language for it. So, and there was a shaming in there. And I remember feeling shame because it was almost like, how can you be so stupid over here when you're so clever over there?
Yeah.
And that shame was just bruising. Whereas for me, that kind of, I get it. So let me go with you and get curious about how, this thing you're experiencing might possibly have to do something with that happened in your childhood. Or might something, have something to do with how you find it uncomfortable to be around people who are this or that.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters, where we're talking to Nina Hobson from Barefoot Coaching about AI and everything that brings. What gives you hope about how AI could be used well?
Certainly within healthcare, I'm really excited. I mean, it's talked about so much, but the detection, early detection of, cancer, not just cancer, but, so many ailments, I think is really exciting. Also, efficiency on an administrative level, potentially there's, if used wisely, it's really, really exciting. While we need to be very, very careful with the use of AI in terms of just being careful with the data, being mindful of, the data behind the scenes, potential for bias, being mindful of the quality of data, I do think that it can help potentially create a more nuanced, less biased. So I'm thinking of things like HR assessments, for example, or job assessments, selection. And there is, potential there. I was reading about recently in, figure skating, AI, being used to create less bias within the rules of figure skating. So, the opportunities are endless, but it's how it's used is key, I think.
I just wanted, because the figure skating, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because you're absolutely right. I've been watching the figure skating. But my problem is, it used to be technical merit score, artistic merit score, and the technical merit used to be, I'm going to do a salco, a loop, a blah, 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 and if I do them, great. If I don't do them, not great. But I understand what AI is doing. It's looking at the lift, it's looking at the revolutions, it's looking at the landing, it's looking at all of those things. However, what that's done to the free program, the artistic program, I think it's ruined it. Because now they're just doing jumps. And I watched all the skating and okay, the men's final, not great for everybody, apart from the winner. And I was so not entertained, because not were they only just doing jumps, but they weren't landing any of the jumps either. So not only you took away all of my beauty, all of the enjoyment and presentation to make it jumps, which you didn't land. I'd rather just have, beauty.
It's that tension again between that, humanity and AI, and supporting that humanness, if you like, whether that's in figure skating or, my role within coaching, that, we can have these standards, in terms of ethical standards and quality of standards, in order. But it is at a level, whether figure skating is a sport, but I also think, it's an art, and I think, coaching, same as that humanness. I don't know if we do have these, as I say, these ethical frameworks and standards, quality assurance, but there's something very human that is very difficult to put on paper, to quantify, to give a score, right? You are a great therapist or a great coach, you scored, this percent. So, the debate, again, going back to, it's so nuanced and complex, right?
It is, and I also thought about the human side of it when you were talking about AI sifting through job applications, because actually somebody might not make the best job application, but a human reading it might think, I see that in them, and AI might dismiss it. So that's what I was thinking.
I agree.
It's definitely not perfect.
I absolutely agree.
Going back to that quality oversight thing, having an expert who knows, who understands the questions to ask, and what the output to understand, and to challenge a bit. So it's really that expert human oversight at every step. It's crucial.
Exactly. Indeed, and kind of on that then, so if you could implement one ethical rule or a norm for AI use, if you could do that tomorrow, say, what would you do?
I think for me, there's something around clear language about transparency. So understanding, I want to know, what I'm using, where my data is going, and being transparent with that. So I think it's about transparency, being really transparent and really clear, how the data is being used and how we are using AI as well. So being really clear, how we as individuals are using AI.
I think that leads nicely to the next question, and it's a little bit, it's funny because I asked exactly this question to our sex therapist Medina when we were talking about polyamory, and that is, what questions should people ask themselves before polyamory or before using AI? And it's the same sort of awareness I think that we need. What sort of things should we be asking?
In terms of asking ourselves, I think we need to ask ourselves, why are we using, what's the purpose of this? Is it to assist or is it to replace, So I think we need to, be really, really careful in terms of our intention, our purpose. For me, we need to be clear about our boundaries. So ask ourselves, when you maybe put a question in and then it will come back, would you like to do this? Would you like to do this? And you're down this little rabbit hole. So being really clear, what what am I using it for? How long am I using it for? And where is my data going? So be really mindful if you're using free versions, for example, to be extra cautious, if you are and the type of data that you're inputting. So if there's anything sensitive there, like I'd say, whoa.
Yeah.
Be cautious. What are you using it for? So anything where if you're looking, it's not high risk, it is admin level, it's not, catastrophic, not super important, great if it can help. But I think anything which veers into emotional support, social skills, I would be very, very, very concerned about personally.
Yeah.
So being clear about its purpose, being clear about your time use, thinking about your boundaries, really important, and leaning into the debate. Don't sit back thinking I'm not an expert here on AI. Learning, reflecting on your own use, being really clear, like, do I understand the AI tools I'm using? Could I be using AI tools without even knowing it? Reflecting on your own use and learning more and more.
That's a really nice point, actually, because I think we are using a lot of AI tools without realising it because of a lot of apps, a lot of editing apps that I use. You just feed in the photographs, it creates something for you, it's done. For a reel, that doesn't matter to me. So that sort of use I can accept. But I know my language to describe it is different. It is, I'm using an app, not I'm using AI. So I think there is that realisation that we need to have that awareness. And so on that, what does responsible AI usage look like for an individual? Is it just a case of we need to know what we're using? Or is it a case we need to be aware of all of these other dangers and the hallucinations and the accuracy and the bias and so on? Do we need to worry too greatly, I think, is the question.
No, I think, it's here. AI is here, and certainly we need to, to not be afraid and to, experiment, but, carefully. It's, great power, great potential, and to use that with the responsibility with that, that if you like, that power entails. And just being mindful of our use, I think being really clear about, again, what are we using it for? How are we using it? And, I don't want people to come away from this and feel scared to use AI. Like, it can offer it has so much potential. And to really, I'm reflecting on how can I use AI more and more effectively?
Yes.
But in a way that is responsible, for myself and for other people, for those that I work with.
That's a beautiful statement. How can I use AI more responsibly and effectively? Those two questions are absolutely fantastic. Nina, where can we learn more about you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You're welcome to find me on LinkedIn. I'm not on social media. That's perhaps another topic for another day.
Yes.
But you can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And we'll have all of Nina's details in the show notes. Thank you so much, Nina. We'll head over to Test the Trend. So Test the Trend is where we give you a weekly challenge. So my question to you, Jude, what would you consider using AI for this week? That's the first question.
Okay.
What would you consider using it
for? This week. I'm starting a new job on Monday, so effectively.
Yeah.
Like a day. So, and I know it's an industry whereby many people use AI to write policies, for example. So maybe I'll write a new policy or update a policy using AI.
Using AI. And actually, what I find when I've used AI to improve my letter writing or improve my emails, or I've actually learned something through what I've read, because I read it back to myself and go, yeah, that sounds so much better. And it never uses words that I wouldn't use and things like that, and if it does, I will take those words out. So I actually learned something about writing through doing it. So the first question is what you're going to use it for. Okay, so second question that you would use, so this is the first thing, what am I using it for? And ask yourself this: which part of the task of writing a policy actually needs you?
I would need to put in, I would need to check that any laws they quote are accurate.
Yes.
Because all policies are based on law, basically. And what else? Well, I would need to make sure everything that it wrote was accurate.
To your constituency, to your tailored, I guess,
It
as
would
well.
need to be tailored. Yes, it would need to be tailored a bit depending on what the policy was for, but also to make sure that, yeah, it does sound like me, essentially.
Yes. Okay. So the first question is, you know, what you're using it for, but then what needs you to do? So what bits do I need to then input into?
Yeah.
What parts of this policy do you think AI can safely help you with? And actually drafting something is pretty straightforward. So what would you say would AI be able to then just be able to, off you go?
Well, once the basics are there, so like the law and what the policy is about, then it would just do the filling.
The style.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
the filling in bit.
Absolutely. And then who's accountable for the final outcome?
Always me.
But because of that, those are the questions you've asked. What task actually needs me and my input? What part can it safely do? Who's responsible for it? You know the answers. You're putting in those checks and balances. That's a responsible use of AI.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I see. Yes,
You know,
exactly.
Why should you have to waste your time
Writing it
and going, oh, hang on, it's done in this way before I need to write it in. That's not a good use of your skills.
No, absolutely.
What is a good use of your skills is then imparting the knowledge or teaching your counsellors or whoever the content of the policy. But writing it out to get it in a nice format.
Yeah, that's time that I could be better spent doing something else. You're absolutely right. So
that's the balance of it. So
yes.
3 things. Which part of the task really actually needs you? What part can it safely do without any problems? And who is accountable for the outcome? And that will teach you some responsibility with using AI. Let us know how you get on in the comments. We've come to the end of the show, and I think what's been really positive about this is how many wonderful uses of AI there is. But those users are still seeing AI as a machine. I think where the problem comes in is where you get that fine line between AI being a talkative companion. When you put in a Google search, it doesn't tell you this information. It just goes, here's the bit, here's another bit, here's another bit, the end. Whereas ChatGPT is, well, here's the information and I've listed it out for you. Would you like me to write it in a table now? It's so sycophantic.
It really is. And it truly sounds like it's a person writing back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and would you like me to take that and change this and add this? And it's like Nina said, you can go down a rabbit hole and then you can be there an hour later making changes to it.
But I still have to come back to, if talking to a machine still makes me say please and thank you because I think it's going to learn bad things, that's a bit of a weird thing I have to get my head around.
And it's interesting you say that because I remember when Alexa's first came out.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've got one now, and I say thank you to it. And my husband looks at me, but it's because it's inherent in me to be polite.
Yeah.
But when they first came out, we didn't have one, and I was at my friend's house, and she's got 3 small children. I was listening, and I thought, is this how in another generation's time? Is this how people are going to speak to each other? Yes. Honestly, it made me feel depressed. Yes. And I love Alexa. Alexa is amazing, and she can be mine's a she. It can be really funny if you ask her to tell you a joke or do whatever. It's funny, but it isn't a person.
Yeah.
But people interacting with an Alexa like they're a person, and children are brought up not knowing any different. It does make me slightly worried for the barking instructions at it, and I thought, oh no, I don't want that to be how people talk to each other.
And that brings me back to another point. I don't know whether I mentioned it on the show or before the show, but it's worth mentioning again, of the whole, if AI is there for me 24/7, I will expect people to be there for me 24/7, and when I don't get it, I'm going to struggle coping with that. That's not a healthy mindset.
No.
So I think Nina's right, it's nuanced, but the human element, we've just got to be more human.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back all the time to what you say is, more connectivity.
Less content.
And less content, exactly. Yeah. And you can't go wrong if everyone follows that, you can't really go wrong.
And ironically, I am very aware we're doing a TV show and a podcast, and that is content, but we do try and make it conversational. We do try and make it helpful and useful, because I believe if the content that we're putting out there under the mental health field, it has to be high level, it has to be quality, and that's what we always try and give. So that's the reason why we do the content, but we try to connect a lot more off screen as well. So on that, have a healthy week.